All right, well, thanks folks for your patience and your willingness to join Tevora and EdgeScan for today's webinar, Enemy at the Gates, Filling the Gaps in Traditional Vulnerability Management. I'm Kevin Cutter. I work as a cybersecurity and compliance advisor for Tevora. I'm joined today by Daryl Arms, Tevora's Chief Security Architect, and Owen Carey, CEO and founder of EdgeScan. For those of you that are still getting acquainted with Tevora, know that we're a worldwide organization that supports several hundred information security services across 7 dedicated practices. That's threat management, cybersecurity framework compliance, data privacy, enterprise risk, cloud security, compliance and governance, incident response, and solutions implementations. Tevora is built from the ground up. We're about 17 years old, and we were built with the intention of being among the very best InfoSec consultancies worldwide. We've achieved this by building each dedicated practice through direct feedback from CISOs, CIOs, security compliance teams, and through our respective InfoSec thought leaders. They oversee our practices. Many of our principals and managing directors are former CISOs themselves, CIOs, and also InfoSec veterans of both the private and public sectors. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys over to Owen and Daryl to speak to the Tevora and EdgeScan methodology.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Well, I'm excited here today to be with Owen, the CEO of EdgeScan, and discuss vulnerability management. And I think we should just jump right in. So right out of the gate, I think at Tevora, we position EdgeScan as a true managed service because you're not just managing the instance in the cloud, but or the VM, but rather because EdgeScan provides a full stack vulnerability analysis validation solution. Owen, can you discuss what full stack vulnerability management means to the audience?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, apologies to people that have noticed my New York Yankees hat, by the way. So yeah, it's the only one I had to wear today. I'm sorry, you know, my LA one was in the wash. But yeah, full stack. I suppose in EdgeScan we look at risk as a full stack problem. You know, you may see analysts siloing vulnerability management, which in some cases is sort of considered network security, and then you have DAST and sort of web security as another silo. With EdgeScan, it's very much been the idea that we want to protect our clients, and you know, we're of the view that people with malicious intent and people that want to break into your businesses and steal your data or deface your applications or whatever, they don't really care what layer the vulnerability is in. So it could be layer 7, which is a fancy name for web application security, or it could be in the host layer, or it could be somewhere in between. So the idea of full stack is the idea of assessing our clients' applications across the entire stack, being the web applications in a meaningful and deep way, but also looking at the underlying infrastructure. So we're looking for things like CVEs, patching issues, protocol, port, firewall problems, etc. And all of those things obviously support the web application as well. So that's the idea of full stack. It's to cover it's in effect to cover the property that we're assessing and what's under management as an entire sort of property, as opposed to saying we only do web application security or we only do, so that's sort of the idea.
Yep. And I mean, what we find on our side of the fence is that EdgeScan provides what we call a close to zero false positive free vulnerability management solution. So when our clients get a report, they're not having to dig through the report and try to go chase down vulnerabilities to validate them, because there's nothing more frustrating as getting a report, sending it over to a developer or somebody in security and telling them, go fix this, when they don't know that it's actually a true vulnerability. That kind of creates a problem.
Yeah, 100%. So something we tend to do in relation to or when we find vulnerabilities, is we validate them to as best we can, which results in the idea of nearly false positive free intelligence. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is, you're spot on, Daryl, in terms of, what we would do is, what we internally it's sort of like noise suppression, or removing all the white noise. I suppose 20 years ago, when you had a scanner and it produced 500 pages of vulnerabilities, you thought it was a great scanner. I think it's flipped on its head now, right? It's flipped on its head in terms of, I've got so many people, I've got a certain size budget, I can't do everything. I need to know what I need to fix now. Where's my priority? What do I need to? And in terms of that, it's also around sort of not turning on the hose pipe and in effect, overloading people with noise. So validation is a very important part of that. And part of validation is two things. One is, it's maybe even three things, but the main two are things like making sure it's not a false positive, and if it is, EdgeScan learns that next time it sees that vulnerability in that space, in that part of the application, it won't flag it again. So it's an FP, which saves an awful lot of time. It also gives cybersecurity teams a bit more credibility with developers, which has always been sort of a thing, I think, in terms of, here's the cyber guys with more bad news, and then half the stuff, it needs to be contextual. And the other part of validation is risk rating. And risk rating is part of context. And it's important to be able to understand what we're assessing and to help our clients, apply a sort of an appropriate level of risk to issues, because you can have the same vulnerability across lots of systems, but in certain cases it could be higher or lower risk depending on the context.
Yeah. So do you find what are some of the hidden costs then of poorly deployed or poorly functioning vulnerability management solutions? Because like you growing up in this industry, I've run a variety of different scanners, and hitting the big red button and getting back a 500-page or 50-page report doesn't always make a lot of people happy. So, what do you see in your experience on that side of the fence?
Yeah, when we give, or when we try our best to give fully validated what we call vulnerability intelligence, it sort of, as I mentioned, it means that when EdgeScan alerts you, it's possibly because it's a real issue, right? But there's a big impact, a big rippling effect throughout an organization that uses EdgeScan. It's the idea that EdgeScan with our API, we can integrate, we can raise tickets, we can chime into Slack channels, we can send emails, we can send SMS messages to whoever in the organization needs to see and hear what's going on in terms of vulnerabilities. So the idea of doing that on the basis of a false positive is a real bad situation. So you're raising tickets, JIRA tickets, or integrating to a GRC system or whatever, and the idea that you're sort of crying wolf when there's actually no wolf there to be worried about. So that's one important part. The other part of it is it's using sort of validated vulnerability intelligence. It sort of gives the security teams more capacity to do other stuff. So nobody in cybersecurity, in effect, wants to sit there validating vulnerabilities all day and scanning, because you won't retain your staff doing so. And good staff are hard to find and hard to come by. So the idea of in effect, of providing a very sort of high quality level of intelligence from a vulnerability standpoint frees up capacity, and also improves things like time to fix. So mean time to remediation start to increase. Developers can work with the security people in terms of understanding the issues, as opposed to the security people in effect trying to figure out what the issues are in the first place. So there's a lot of time saving, effort saving, and efficiencies when people are sort of presented with the accurate data, I think is the word. Yeah.
So from your 2020 vulnerability report, does the size of the company change the results or findings? And if not, what do you see happening with the clients?
Let me jump down to that slide. So it's interesting. We found with EdgeGAN, obviously, we started small. We have some great clients over in your part of the world, in California now, where we really love working with them, and some of them are very big, and we have some rather large clients in Europe as well. We find the size of the organization at a certain point, particularly when it gets maybe out to 100 plus in terms of staff, which isn't a very big organization, relatively speaking. It doesn't start to change in terms of the amount of criticals, the amount of high risks tend to be the same. And there's a couple of things there. Like when you have a very small organization, maybe the amount of assets, the amount of property and estate that they have to manage is rather small. But something we talked about this yesterday, Daryl, is sort of, and like for anybody that's listening, that runs a cybersecurity team or as part of a cybersecurity team, you see that if you were in early, your team, you might have had, say, 4 or 5 people or whatever. And as the company grew, maybe to 5 or 10 times the employment, the employee account, the amount of staff increased by maybe 4 or 5 times over a period of time. I'm damn sure your security team didn't grow linearly with that.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges is even though maybe the staff count grew, which is probably a result of revenues growing, more offerings, more systems, more technology, we find that there's still a bit of pressure on cybersecurity teams to handle this growth, such that even though organizations get bigger, the actual percentages of high risks, of critical risks, etc., seem to be the same regardless of the size of the company, which is interesting. So yeah, I think it's certainly around the idea that cybersecurity in some ways can be still deemed a cost of doing business, as opposed to an enabler of doing business. And yeah, I think there's some element of that, and the reason that, but it's also probably that staff, and growing teams and getting good staff is challenging as well.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that the staff on the cyber side doesn't necessarily grow linearly with the actual growth of the business then.
Yeah, in most cases, unless it's a cybersecurity company, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Google, Twitter, exactly. Yeah, I get it. So in your experience, why do we see a large quantity of critical vulnerabilities still in our engagements with clients, and what can be done to eliminate or reduce those critical findings? That seems to be kind of a trend with us.
Yeah. It's a good point. So I think it comes down to fundamentals. So like in the 2020 stats report that we have sort of a slide here. I know we're jumping around, but I think it's good to do that as well. We're looking at about 35% of all external web application vulnerabilities were either high or critical, which is pretty high. And it's interesting as well, where when we talk about breaches, and we talk about organizations getting breached, and the sort of the PR line is the company was hit by a sophisticated attack. And when it does transpire, it wasn't that sophisticated. It was very much probably something fundamentally wrong, either in the application layer, or a patch was missing, or a mixture of both, or a mixture of different CVEs, etc., etc. So ultimately, I think in terms of highs and criticals, and sort of what we like to say, and sort of when we get all security eyes, and we talk about a thing called risk density, and it's the percentage of occurrence of highs and critical risk issues, as a percentage of all issues we're discovering, it's still very high. And it's probably in relation to that there's two things. Is one, fundamentals, but I don't think most people aren't guilty of ignoring fundamentals. It's just that it's about time and prioritization, and it's about trying to do everything with a limited resource, with limited resources, with limited capability and capacity. So I think that's one thing. But the other thing is about visibility. I think visibility is underrated, and it's really important. And something we have with EdgeScan is we have a couple of things around visibility, around like finding ports or admin admin login consoles open, or finding silly ports or exposed services, or firewall rules not being particularly strong. We have this sort of continuous asset profiling piece with EdgeScan that helps our clients. And when we find something, it runs continuously, and as it finds things, it immediately notifies you to say you've got an exposure. So it's about attack surface and the idea of trying to track that, because a lot of organizations have a growing, and hopefully, this is a good thing, is that they have a growing catalog of systems and services to give to their clients. And cybersecurity's, job is to try and make sure that everything that we're deploying to the internet is secure, and it's really tough. And one of the ways of doing that is to have some sort of continuous visibility. And we're finding a lot of organizations, I suppose, prior to using EdgeScan, but obviously we're not the only show in town.
Right.
But visibility is a really important aspect, and if you don't have it, you can't secure it.
Yep.
And something we're finding a lot of traction, Daryl, at the moment is API discovery. So it's the idea of we've lots of ports and we've lots of APIs over HTTP on our external facing infrastructure, and but in many cases the organizations don't know where they are or what they do. So yep. API discovery is sort of an important, and it's a very simple concept, and it all sort of leads into the idea of visibility.
Yeah, I think on our end, like I continually see three things that across all of our clients, big, tall, and small, and that's, like you said, like lack of visibility, no integration, and the ability to actually identify, what's going on in their environment in a real-time basis. That seems to be kind of the trend in our clients across the board.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that's quite simple, and we have things like Nmap. If you want to do it yourself, or build something around sort of Nmap. How old is Nmap? It's probably nearly as old as me. But the thing is that we need to do it on a consistent, continuous basis, such as that as systems are spun up and torn down, and as things are deployed and decommissioned, and so on and so forth across an enterprise, we need to make sure that we know what's going on, because we're not able to secure stuff if we don't know what's there to secure. So yeah.
One of the trends, I looked at your report, for the 2020 vulnerability analysis report, and it was pretty interesting. And what I saw, which was pretty high on the chart there, was crypto flaws still seem prevalent.
Crypto, our friend.
Yeah. So why is that? What's going on? What's driving that?
Yeah, a lot of that sort of. So if you look at sort of the most common vulnerabilities across the full stack in our 2020 report, which is retrospective for the previous 12 months, it's like 40% of issues were crypto related. The majority of that, I can guarantee, were SSL TLS related. We do have some great stuff to try and drive that fight. But the root cause is that SSL is dead, and the reason it's dead is implementation flaws at a very basic level, which is by no fault of any developer or any administrator. It's actually the actual SSL as a thing is broken, and now we know that. And then we moved into TLS, and and actually there are some fundamental flaws with the earlier versions of TLS as well. I think in 2016 PCI automatically failed people. I think at a certain point, June 2016 or something, can't remember the exact dates, correct me if I'm wrong here in terms of dates and stuff, but it was a cutoff point for anybody that had SSL enabled. They actually ultimately were getting an automatic fail. And I think in 2018 there was something around TLS as well, that earlier versions of TLS there was an automatic fail. So the problem is that people are trying to use encryption. People are trying to do the right thing, but if what's available, not everybody cares about PCI. Let's be very clear about that. But right. but if what's available, what people have to use is fundamentally flawed, we're going to get a lot of problems. And there's a legacy thing there as well. one thing that I do think that, you know, in terms of light at the end of the tunnel there is that a lot of browsers, Chrome, you know, Safari, DuckDuckGo, you know, all of those guys, Edge, whatever you know you use, you know, the idea would be is that a lot of those browsers are just aren't going to use those weaker protocols. So and if they are forced to use those weaker protocols, an error comes up on the browser saying it's using a weak protocol, which is good. It means that you know, it means that it should, you know, so hopefully vendors or websites that do have weak SSL or TLS, well, you know, weak TLS, you know, the users will say, hey, I'm getting an error in my Chrome browser saying that you've got crappy crypto, you know, and hopefully it will get fixed. So that's really the root cause of the crypto issue, in my opinion.
Got it. Let me ask you a question. So, from your guys' research in the 2020 report, what percentage of the clients do you see today that do not have adequate patching solution in place? I would say probably around 50% of the clients we assess today do not have adequate, what I would call an adequate enterprise patching solution. So what's your guys' experience?
Patching can be hard, even though it sounds easy, and we've been talking about it, you know, for how long? Probably since the days of, you know, when COVID and ITIL came out and these types of things, these older, long-standing compliance standards. You know, and it's part of everybody's life. And I think it's important to mention as well that patching doesn't purely rely on things like, you know, it's not purely focused when we talk about patching. It's not purely focused on things like operating systems and web servers and databases and firewalls. You know, we also have to think about patching in terms of components that our web applications are using. And, you know, there's lots of studies out there by a lot of SaaS vendors and sort of open source component security vendors. And you know, and they did talk about the idea that, like, you know, 80–90% of the code in most applications hasn't been written by the developer. So patching also includes components that developers use, be it a JavaScript component or some, you know, API component or something, which you know, you take off the shelf and you wire it up and it works. But you know, we do have this idea of CVEs, and CVEs are you know, they're important in terms of, you know, it's a dictionary or it's an encyclopedia of known vulnerabilities. Now you have this idea of CVSS, which in my view can be a blunt instrument, but it isn't. Well, we need to score things in order to express how critical they are. But like CVSS doesn't always get it right, you know. It is rather blunt, and things like PCI rely on that in terms of, you know, at what point is a CVE a fail or an issue that needs to be fixed in order to be PCI compliant, and sometimes that's a blunt instrument as well. But we are where we are, you know. There's no black and white, but we do find that you know, about 77%, you know, in the slide that I'm showing now, of systems have a CVE, but that doesn't mean it's a critical or a high risk. It could be a low risk CVE, right? You know, and there's a couple of approaches there. So sometimes people will only chase, and this is due to efficiencies and capacity of the team and of the IT team as a whole. In effect, is, look, we're going to try and nail all high and critical risk issues across the entire enterprise, which is a great approach. So therefore, there may be many systems with low risk CVEs, you know, or as a result of, we didn't apply the patch to that thing because it's a low risk issue or whatever. But we do find that organizations with sort of lots of CVEs on a particular system. So we have an example here: 15% would have more than 10. We find when you get to that end of sort of the scale, those organizations either didn't know they had the system live, they didn't patch it for some reason, maybe it just fell off the radar. But you find that when systems aren't maintained and loved and nurtured, you find that you know, the CVE count and the clustering of CVEs tends to ramp up over time, because it's always over time these things happen. So you can be you can be sort of either side of the coin. Either you may have some low risk CVEs.
Right.
From a compliance standpoint, hey, you've got some open CVEs, you got to get them fixed. And then the CISO says, well, no, I'm not fixing those. I need to focus on stuff that actually may have an impact on my business. So when you get into sort of an EdgeCon dashboard and you get into the metrics, you'll see that maybe older low risk CV, like so older CVs are generally low risk issues, and the critical stuff people are trying to get fixed quicker for obvious reasons. But you know, unfortunately, that isn't always the case. And you know, you look at sort of the Verizon DBIR and some other reports about sort of the age of CVEs and the age of you know, vulnerabilities. Like the majority of breaches occurring you know, by virtue of CVEs of known vulnerabilities. We're not looking at 0 days particularly. We're not looking at sort of, we're looking at, you know, maybe 3 to 5 year old vulnerabilities, which are well understood. There's exploit code out there. And a lot of those are which have been the root cause of a breach. It's not sort of the 0 day Mission Impossible sort of sexy stuff. It's the older things that we need to worry about. So you know, there's also the thing around, but there is one caveat there. It's a buyer beware thing, and it's the idea that sometimes lower risk CVEs are the root cause of things like ransomware and malware infection.
Yeah, they use those as the bridgehead, right?
Exactly. So even though it's a low risk issue, it's being leveraged by a ransomware attack or something, which if that lower risk CVE didn't exist in your system, the ransomware may not have been as successful. So, hey, you know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, I suppose, in many cases.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. In your experience on the EdgeScan side of the house, you know, what percentage of customers do you initially scan and find severe vulnerabilities?
Yeah, it's quite a lot. I suppose how we're sort of reasonably successful with EdgeScan is we tend to trial. You know, we give our clients a free trial, right? You know, it's
free rent.
you know, and you know, you guys, you know, we've done some great stuff through Tevora as well in terms of demonstrating sort of the power of the way we do this EdgeScan thing, and we do find a lot of you know, high risks and sort of critical risks, unfortunately, as well, even in trials, but also with paying customers. And there's a couple of things, the reasons. You know, one of the things are, I suppose, why do we find that stuff? You know, people are looking to buy EdgeScan or work with EdgeScan, so they obviously have some sense of maturity about cyber, and they understand why they need it. So you know, do you think that we wouldn't find as many? One of the things that we find is that pure automation doesn't find everything.
Exactly.
Pure automation, and one of the things of pure automation is coverage, right? You know, you mentioned, Darrell, about hitting the red button and you know, putting the URL into a web application, hitting the red button, and hopefully the stuff will come out the other end. Sometimes scanning has difficulty in getting coverage. And we've had challenges ourselves, let's be honest, with certain types of technologies and getting coverage, but we've always, you know, we're always developing, and we've always addressed these things. But coverage is important, because if you can't get coverage, if you can't, in effect, say, for lack of a better word, crawl a website properly and use all the functions in a website, how are you meant to be able to test them? So you know, we find with EdgeScan, our coverage is reasonably good, and maybe, you know, compared to our competitors, we're testing parts of the application a typical scanner out of the box hasn't found or hasn't assessed, and we're finding criticals that way. The other piece with EdgeScan is the validation. So sometimes, you know, the automation part of EdgeScan would find something, and it may be sort of a potential HTML injection or something, you know, something that may be a medium risk issue, not particularly show. But then when we do the validation on occasion, we actually uncover that it's actually much worse. So automation didn't have the context in terms of the exploitability of the issue. And so we tend to find issues that way as well, quite sort of effectively.
So do you think that like for most companies, the best approach is not just to run a scanner, but do like more of like a hybrid approach where you're running a solution, like a scanning solution and manual validation? Because it just seems like on our side of the fence, when we are running into companies that are asking for help on the outside, particularly from the edge, they have some type of vulnerability scanning solution in place, but then we come in with edge scan and we're picking up and finding some pretty significant flaws.
Yeah. No, it's well, I suppose, you know, it's evidence that I believe that, because otherwise I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing for a living. But yeah, I'm a big believer, you know, in and I've been involved, you know, as you know, in OWASP and the testing guide, the code review guide, and all this stuff for years. And I'm a big believer. I see automation advancing. I don't believe AI and ML is where marketing people or where sales people say it's at, and I don't think it will solve, and I don't think it will beat human intent and passion to break stuff. And what we are ultimately defending against is people with malicious intent and very, very talented people. These people do it for a living, and if these people don't exploit, they don't get paid, right? You know, if this is their living. Cybercrime is $1 trillion industry or whatever it may be, and the idea is if these guys aren't successful, they're not making any money. So, you know, in terms of using software to defend against humans, so using automation, pure automation to defend against humans is folly. It doesn't work. You will pick up the low-hanging fruit. You will, you know, you will hopefully find some of the stuff that a college undergrad or even a guy in his bedroom will find, which has happened, right? It's happened in recent years where huge organizations were hacked by a guy, you know, or girl in their bedroom. But the thing is, you know, is that if you want to really be at the races, in my view, you know, with EdgeScan, it's very much always been automate the hell out of stuff as long as our accuracy and coverage is never, as long as there's no negative impact to accuracy or coverage. So the way we look at it with EdgeScan is we're trying to augment human capability. We use automation for scale and for frequency and for coverage, because we put a lot of work into sort of how to assess things properly and not take too long in certain cases, and also, you know, assess them deep as much as we can as well in other cases, because we don't want to scan to last 20 years either on big websites, because you never get the results. But also it's also about sort of having that human element. And you know, actually it rings a bell that the RSA conference just gone was called the human element, wasn't it? So it's about having the human element and not relying completely on automation, because the guys that want to break into your websites are not using app. You know, I'm not going to mention a commercial scanner, but they're not using the commercial scanners that you use. They're probably using Notepad, a browser, and a bash script. And they're using their noodles. And if you think, in my view, using automation to defend against that is going to work, you know, I think you may have to think about that. And that's the reason why we built EdgeScan. You know, it's very much around automation. Like lots of automation, love automation, it's great. But when it gets to complex, contextual, and sort of interesting exploits, automation really isn't there. And you know, the EdgeScan is a hybrid of humans. It's sort of a hybrid of humans and automation, you know.
So more so like on the scanner side, it's more like for I'll call it like breadth, and then like the manual validation is more like for depth.
Yeah, it's like manual validation is important for risk prioritization. Manual validation is, you know, and it's not everything needs to be manual validated. Let me be very clear, because scalability is important, but there are certain types of vulnerability we need to have a look at if we find them, to see how bad they are, or if they're real, or, you know, in certain types of vulnerability we can use automation to validate, you know, and we've been working very hard on that internally in EdgeScan. But in terms of risk is a human concept, and like, you know, if every vulnerability that begins with X, you know, is a high risk issue, and your scanner is telling you that, you know, I can guarantee you some of those vulnerabilities can sit in the back, you know, can take a break, and we really need to be focusing on the issues that are important. So risk rating is an important aspect, and risk rating is definitely a human concept. So when we find a critical risk issue, we may be able to use automation to validate it. Fine, like a SQL injection, they're easy to validate. They're easy to find, or reasonably easy to find, depending on there's certain. Like, let's not get dragged into the weeds there, but the idea will be is understanding what the risk is, because certain flavors of SQL injection may be blocked by other compensating controls on the database layer. And obviously then the risk could change. Certain types of cross-site scripting, if it's in the header, may not be as exploitable as you think, because of the way the internet works. So a tool telling you everything is high risk doesn't really help you fix the things that matter. And the idea of validation isn't just making sure something is real. It's also the idea of trying to try to help you prioritize stuff. And what we do with some of our larger enterprise clients, with EdgeGuard, is certain vulnerabilities matter a lot to them, depending on their business. And when we onboard a new client, they may say, if you find this type of vulnerability, it could be crypto related, it could be it could be something to do with APIs or whatever. We want this, shouted from the treetops. We want alerts made. We want the risk level to be escalated above what it normally would be, because those vulnerabilities are important to my business and the way our infrastructure is held together in our systems, and we do that as well, which means that people are getting what they need as opposed to what we think they need.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan. So I'm a big fan of, particularly on the website, your on-demand scanning, because a lot of our clients use that for testing vulnerabilities, and they go back and make the changes and or even have to potentially even reboot a box to make that change, and then the continuous improvement that you actually get from the on-demand scans as well. But the one question I still got to ask you is, essentially is why can't software just secure software? What the heck's the problem?
It comes back to the old problem that software is dumb, and software. Let's put it this way, right? We build a website. We use good developers. We've designed it. We're using maybe some agile process to do it. It's still going to have bugs. Microsoft, multi-billion-dollar company, they have bugs. They issue patches to Patch Tuesday. They still have bugs. They make mistakes. Doesn't necessarily need to be a security bug, but it's a bug nevertheless, right? Even Tesla, they have updates for bugs for their cars, because they're pretty much, Tesla is pretty much a golf cart with a calculator built in type of thing.
Sure.
It's not even a car anymore, really, is it? In the traditional sense. But the idea will be is that, like, if we're building software to test software, the assumption in there is that the software we've built to test the software is perfect, right? Because otherwise, what's to say that the software we're building to test software hasn't got bugs itself, and it's not, so it isn't detecting everything, or it's missing things, or it's getting things mixed up, or it's getting caught in a loop or whatever when it's doing its testing. So that's one piece of it. So software testing software, sort of, you do the prerequisite there. If you think that's the solution, that automation on its own solution, that the automation you're using is perfect in order to find vulnerabilities and weaknesses in their software, but no software is perfect. And then, I mentioned it before, the second part is context. Context gives rise, to risk, and vulnerabilities. You may have the same vulnerability across 5 systems, but the risk on 2 of those systems is much higher because of the context of where the vulnerability is, or what the system does. So automation doesn't know. Automation knows HTTP. It sends requests. It gets responses. It parses responses. If it sees a signature, it says, "Here's a vulnerability," and it reports it. It doesn't understand what the system is. So you sort of, when you're getting into context and risk, you're getting into something akin to pen testing and penetration testing. But penetration testing is cool. It's deep. We also do penetration testing in EdgeGuard. We have a professional services arm. We love it. I did it for a long part of my career. But the thing is that it's not scalable. I can't do it all the time. It's expensive. So where are we then? So if we automation has its problems, pen testing is good. What we need to do is have something combined, something in between the two, and the idea would be, you know, in my view, is something like what we're trying to do in EdgeScan. Is it's a hybrid. It's the idea that automation, you know, important frequency, scale, et cetera, but then we need depth, and we need depth can be things like human curiosity, you know, and like the idea of depth will be complex vulnerabilities that automation can't find. So software testing software, which is where we've been for a long time as an industry, you buy your $4,000 scanner, you press go, you fire it at your IPs, and you think you're secure, and
Kevin?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. It looks like we may have lost Owen for a moment, so let's give him a second, see if he can come back here.
Okay.
Sorry, folks, bear with us for just a minute. We're going to get Owen back in here.
I think he might have got, I know it was the first day of school for a lot of people, so he might have gotten dropped.
Yeah. I think every one of these platforms is getting hit pretty hard right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi guys, it's Jan here from EdgeScan. I'm just messaging Owen here, but it looks he's not sending me any communication yet. So keep you posted.
Okay. I noticed connecting in over the pond.
Well, worst case scenario, I know we do have several other EdgeScan professionals on the line that should be able to field some of the questions that have come in, but obviously we still have 14 minutes left. So I do want to use the full hour and make sure that we can give everybody that's listening in the most value we possibly can.
Sure. Understood.
Folks, appreciate your patience. Just give us one more minute and we're going to go ahead and have another professional from EdgeScan chime in if we cannot get Owen back, but we're trying right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hi guys, I just had Owen on a call there and his internet is gone.
Okay.
So if any of the, if Andrew or who else is here from EdgeScan wants to jump in, feel free. I'm just going to see. I can open.
Hey, Kevin. Hey, Daryl. It's Andrew Pianadosi.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going?
I think
All
we're
right,
having a little technology challenge here.
Yeah. No, I think there's a big storm rolling through Ireland, so I think a lot of people are having difficulties with
There is.
Yeah, I get it. I think we were kind of going towards the end anyway, where we were going to, and I thought maybe after Owen was finishing his thought, maybe we would just kind of maybe ask Kevin if there was any questions out there that we could potentially field.
Yeah, we've actually we've accumulated 6 questions, so it seems like folks are. Oh, we might have gotten. Owen, are you back with us? I see him sitting there. Huh.
he's in what I call sniper mode now.
Yeah, he is. He's threat hunting. He's doing what he does best. Well, folks, thanks. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just for sake of efficiency, since we have 10 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of these questions here, and anyone that feels comfortable, confidently answering either from the Tevora or EdgeScan side, please feel free. So the first question was, to what extent is high quality continuous authentication technology an effective mitigant for cybersecurity risk?
Oh, and that's a great question for you. Are you with us?
Looks like you may be trying to get back or muted. We can come back to that one too. So the next one up was, why do you consider EdgeScan a managed service? Are they providing everything for a client? And what does the client need to maintain? So it was a 3-parter.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Good question. I'm happy to touch on that. So this is Andrew Pianadosi. I'm on the sales team here in North America. EdgeScan is a managed service in that we're managing the testing in-house. So we couple 26 pieces of technology, commercial off the shelf, open source, and proprietary technologies that we've spun up internally. So we leverage automation with validation on the back end. So we're controlling all the testing in-house. All the vulnerabilities are validated by way of our SOC in Dublin, Ireland. So that's the managed service aspect. In terms of what you'd be in control of as a security organization, we would provide you with remediation advice, context on vulnerabilities, and a proof of concept in terms of how we've gone about finding and potentially exploiting potential vulnerabilities. You would then be tasked with remediating the vulnerabilities yourselves. From a truly managed aspect, we're the ones that are managing the testing and the validation. So that's the long and short answer of why would be considered a managed service.
Yeah, so you're not just managing the instance, you're actually managing the context, you're actually managing the actual results that are driven down to the reports, and then letting the customer do the manual handoff at that point.
Okay, you guys hear me?
There we go.
Hey, Owen.
Well, sorry about that. My internet just completely died. It's the first time it's happened, but hey.
Yeah,
sorry.
we heard you're dealing with quite a storm out there, so it's understandable. And everybody was a trooper and hung out on the webinar, so we haven't lost anybody. So Andrew just stepped in and answered one of the questions. We now have about 8 minutes left, and we just want to be mindful if some folks do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So there was another question that Andrew thought would be perfect for you, Owen. It was, to what extent is high quality continuous authentication technology an effective mitigant for cybersecurity risk?
Continuous, yeah.
Authentication technology, effective mitigant for cybersecurity risk.
Authentication technology, yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. So, all right. So it really depends on the business you're in, right? So you know, we've got clients where they want frictionless authentication. So frictionless authentication is very much the idea that you know, multi-factor and stuff is. I hope I'm answering the question right, but you know, the idea of multi-factor authentication, and you know, there's some great solutions, there's some single sign-on solutions, etc. They're all pretty, you know, but the idea would be, so some businesses do not want that level of friction because let's say with gaming, and when I mean gaming will be a euphemism for gambling in Europe, and those organizations want you to log in really quickly, place your bet, you know, or even a trading application in some cases, where if you're required to go through sort of an onerous authentication solution, you know, you may move to a different vendor. But I'm seeing, you know, that what I'm seeing in terms of problems, authentication, yeah, it helps. You know, it improves security. It is what it is. You know, it's authentication. So try and for you to prove who you are, so you can get access to resources. But you know, in terms of the most common issues we're finding are either, you know, and also you'll see in the news, you know, in the news, it's ransomware attacks are rampant. Ransomware attacks, why are they rampant? Because people, a lot of ransomware is leveraging known CVEs, which aren't being patched, particularly on the internal side. So if people do click on links and download, you know, dancing cat videos, which is actually ransomware, or a COVID-19 tracking app, which is actually a ransomware, and they're not patched, they're getting exploited. So authentication, yeah, you know, it's important, and it's important because we can talk authentication. You may have weak auditing, you know, sort of, you know, sort of the domino effect, and things can fall in terms of incident response after that. But overall, you know, what we're seeing is pretty much things like the root causes of the issues are things like patching, visibility, some basic levels of software and web application security, and like there are things like, say, for example, like PCI that are driving that, and people that are concerned about that are doing their best to be compliant with that, which is good, you know, and PCI is evolving all the time. You know, you have the OWASP SVS, which is important as well, which is actually very, very good document. It's underloved and underused, in my opinion. But that application verification standard, the ASVS from OWASP, is really good in terms of the basic things, you know, that should be tested for, and that should obviously result in security based on the level of rigor of testing. So yeah, authentication, you know, fine. It's an important aspect, but I think the majority of things we're seeing today are in relation to human social engineering, lack of patching, and maintenance of software in general, and then those two combined are resulting in CVEs and vulnerabilities being exploited, which is resulting in things like ransomware attacks and various data breaches.
Great. So yeah, there's two more questions that I can see, and then there's actually maybe one or two others. I'll go down. Anything that does not get addressed from the top of the hour, if you do need to hop, both EdgeScan and Tevora will be in touch to get you a quality answer, but I'm going to go ahead and put another one out to you now. Is there an option to get scan results as is without additional EdgeScan engineers validation?
Oh yeah, in terms of EdgeScan, yeah, there is. Yeah, you can do that if you wish. It makes our lives easier. But if that's something you need or want, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we've actually had customers, Kevin, we've actually had customers ask for that because one of the problems, what I've seen, not a problem, but one of the issues I've seen pop up with EdgeScan is some of the results are so damn good that the client comes back and says, hey, I got a one-page report. I want to see all the true findings. And so we went back and actually created a custom report for them.
Well, that's great, because the next question
Sure,
kind of piggybacks. It says, how long
Yeah.
does it take to get the report after scans are initiated?
How to get a report? Well, reports, you download a report yourself. So
Okay.
if I do a report now, whatever's been validated or pushed, regardless of validation, into the portal, you can run a report. We also have an API, and people are using that to consume the data into various other systems and reporting engines, etc. themselves. You can also set up alerts. Alerts can give you the oversight that maybe if an assessment has been completed, an alert can be generated to tell you that somebody's been finished or completed. And you can do alerts for if a new vulnerability is being pushed to the portal. You can generate an alert based on the asset that matters to you and the criticality of the vulnerability, and also the layer of the vulnerability. Is it a host layer network issue, CD, or is it a web application layer? But just to harp back on the non-validated stuff, we do on occasion, and we can easily do it. Some clients want to say, can you give me a list of all the FPs? So because when we validate, we're getting rid of all the noise and all the sort of the crud. But if any of our clients want a list of all the false positives that we did suppress, we can give you them as well. It's easy. We can separate them out nicely so they don't get mixed up, which is probably important. Yeah, we can do that. Because we do store all the FPs, because the reason we do that is as we continually assess, EdgeScan can say, yeah, I found that, and it's an FP. Therefore, and so it doesn't have to continually ask itself, is this real or not? So, yeah.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, just to be aware, we are at the top of the hour. The recording is going to be made available to everybody. We do have a few additional questions for those of you that are able to stay on. I'm going to go ahead and ask both Owen, Daryl, the EdgeScan Tevora teams, the rest of these so we can get them out there. And they will be available again on the recording. So if you have to hop, thank you so much for your time. But those that are able to stay with us, please hang on the line so we can get through the rest of these. So the next question was, how much time on average will one of the EdgeScan security analysts spend on creating and validating findings for a report?
Creating and finding. So creating them, creating findings, well,
validating
depends,
findings,
right? Yeah, validating. So that's validation. So validation on average can take anything from 10 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on the issue. But when we talk about saving time for teams, the average time to validate an issue, we say it's 10 to 15 minutes. And then what we're doing is we're adding up all the false positives and all the process vulnerabilities for a month, and then we can say how much time was spent, how much time we spent in saving you time on a given quarter or a month. So the amount of time for validation before something gets published into the portal is normally it's variable, but it can be from minutes to maybe an hour. It really depends on the issue. If it's a business logic,
company size and complexity, then.
Yeah, it's I think one of the things, like if it's a business logic issue, it could be taking a little bit longer to make sure that it's a real issue. So we may validate by running it through a number of use cases with various levels of authorization to make sure the issue is what it is. But then if it's a SQL injection issue or something, or an injection issue, or remote command injection, or an across scripting or something, those things we can validate quite quickly. But we don't, as I mentioned, we don't need to validate every vulnerability. We do have technology to validate certain issues using automation, but certain, as I mentioned, some vulnerabilities we do tend to validate because of the types of vulnerabilities they are, particularly complex ones, authorization, business logic issues. And certain types of injection as well. Sometimes you can get an injection attack, and it looks like one and smells like one, but it's not very exploitable. So obviously the risk would is, yeah.
Perfect. And the next question was, can you GEO fence data for a customer based upon region or country?
Yeah. So we've lots of ways of doing that. Every user. Every client in EdgeCon has a super user, and super users can limit who can see what. So that's the first thing. So I'm guessing geo fencing can be if a user comes in from a certain location. The thing is with geo fencing, as in this IP is an Irish IP versus an IP in on an ISP in LA or something. Like those things can be easily spoofed, right? But what we can do is we can tag assets and data and vulnerabilities using tagging, such that certain users can only see certain things. Certain users can only see certain assets. Certain users can only see certain layers. So maybe certain people can see assets which are tagged only with ISO 27001 or something, some tag like that. And they can only see the web application layer as opposed to the network layer. So super users can see everything, and you can slice and dice what users see what and what parts of what vulnerabilities they can see pretty easily. A super user. So we give that ability to the client. We obviously will help them set it up, etc. But the idea will be is that the super user will be somebody that understands their own business, their own team structure, etc. We are there to help in terms of anything like that.
Excellent. And I believe this other question is the last one. Actually, you've pointed out, I think, a good portion of this throughout the presentation. But just to kind of confirm, if we choose to use folks, can EdgeScan meet industry certifications or regulations such as ISO 27001, which you just mentioned in the last question for tagging, GDPR, CCPA, or PCI DSS, which also came up throughout your presentation?
Yeah, good one. Good questions. We are ISO 27001 certified, and ISO 27000 is pretty loose in terms of what's required as like if you're looking for certification for ISO, and part of that is yes, you need to get pen testing, yes, you need to get vulnerability management. Our EdgeScan, our SaaS, our operations, and our professional service are all ISO 27001 certified. We're also PCI ASV, so we're approved scanning vendors for PCI, which means that you can use the data when and we've had a particular client which has been very helpful over the last year in improving this in terms of feedback, and it's very much around with PCI, there's a very prescribed format for the report and a very prescribed way in how you handle vulnerabilities in terms of compliance. So PCI tell you how you have to do it, and we've been working with a number of clients in terms of doing that in a much, we're improving all the time in terms of, the report is a PCI formatted report, which then you have to give to a QSA, which is a sort of a PCI auditor, and you can say, this is my ASV scan for the quarter or whatever. So we are that. GDPR as well. So GDPR doesn't say, there's not really a thing called GDPR compliant scanning or something. But in terms of best of breed, we're a CREST certified organization. Love it, I like that, I hate that, I'm not sure. And then we're PCI certified as well. So we have a fairly decent pedigree in terms of the level of rigor we can go through, and we're happy. I will happily be benchmarked to any other vendors. So I think we're ticking all the boxes. There are certain things we don't do, but we're planning to do the next year. Things like FedRAMP, FISMA, and some of the more North American centric stuff. We are European, but we're focusing on those things at the moment in terms of helping people with those issues as well. But we're not quite there yet in terms of federal compliance and stuff like that.
Great. We did actually had one other question that came in as you were addressing what I thought was going to be the last one. It's, where is EdgeScan hosted in the cloud?
So can you repeat that? You broke up me there.
Oh, I apologize. Where is EdgeScan hosted in the cloud?
Yeah, it's AWS. We have instances in Northern Europe, which is good because of GDPR, and we're pretty paranoid about privacy in Europe. So a lot of our clients use our Northern European data instances of EdgeScan. But in terms of like there are certain countries with sovereignty and data sovereignty laws, but anywhere with AWS we can spin up an EdgeScan basically. But I suppose our busiest instances in Northern Europe, but we can spin up EdgeScan in North America, in Malaysia, and so on and so forth. So anywhere where AWS is because we're Amazon, we live in Amazon as a service.
Now there's not much they're not going to touch, so that's good to know. Well, I think that does it. I just want to let you guys all know we really appreciate the time, both from Tevora and EdgeScan, the quality of the questions. It was great. Just so you know, both Tevora and EdgeScan reps, potentially including myself, I saw a few of my own clients in attendance today. We will be following up to ensure that you got everything that you were looking for from both Owen and Daryl over today's presentation. If anything else is existing, Tevora does have dedicated practices for solutions, implementations, threat management, compliance, so everything as far as the works, if you will, on the services side. So if you'd like to pick Daryl's brain to kind of understand strategy for implementation or one of the other areas around services, we'll absolutely be in touch there. And then naturally, the EdgeScan team is going to be in touch to see what they can do to kind of up the game in your environment when it comes to vulnerability scanning. So we all really appreciate it on behalf of both Tevora and EdgeScan teams. Thank you very much. We'll give you, thanks for going 10 minutes over. We'll give you the rest of the day back, and have a great week.
Thanks,